Hey everybody, hope you're having a good day, and I am here with another Shelly Talk, and this is going to be episode number 2. Not about my grandma so much as about my dad this time, and a episode that I'm going to call The Road Trip. It was an experience, to say the very least. My dad was mentally ill when I was growing up. He was bipolar and had borderline personality disorder, both of which were untreated because he was a engineer with a military contractor and had a high-level position where if they found out that there was something wrong with him mentally, that would have been the end of him. So they didn't know anything about it. He didn't take any medication for it. And when you're in a situation like that, you have a hair trigger temper, and generally at least one person is going to be the punching bag, so to speak. He rarely ever touched me, but his words were quite enough to be harmful. And so I had to go through that when I was growing up. He was pretty mean. And I'm not saying all of this to try and gain sympathy. I'm just giving you the facts of how it was. I tried to avoid him as much as possible. I would stay in my room a lot. I was out on my bike, running around with my friends. I just didn't go home if I could help it. So, Mom said to me, after she hurt her back, and the chiropractor and our family doctor said, there's no way that you can go on this road trip, because it was 2.5 days in the car. And so she said, so you're telling me that I have to fly? Yes. I don't know whether there was not enough money for a plane ticket for me, or whether she just wanted to be rid of us for a couple of days. But she told me that I would have to go with Dad. Oh my gosh. I said, you can't do this to me. Please get me a ticket. No, he really shouldn't be going by himself. And this will give you a chance to try and get to know each other, and maybe find a way to like each other. I said, we'll kill each other. I said, this can't work. Well, why don't you try? You might find out that you like being together. Okay, well, there was no way that I could talk her out of it. So we dropped her off at the airport, and off we go. I didn't say a word to him until he said, you know what, I'm hungry. Let's stop at Stuckey's. Well, if you had grown up in Central Florida in the 60s and 70s, you definitely knew where Stuckey's was. It was all along the roads, and there were billboards like every 3 or 4 miles telling you that there was a Stuckey's nearby. And so he decides that's where we're going to go. Okay, fine. And they had a little restaurant there. They had, candies and stuff, and a little gas station, but the candies were like their real big thing. They wanted to sell that. And I never really thought that they looked terribly appealing, but okay, whatever. When we pulled into the driveway, he makes up this little song on the fly. And I never forgot it. He does this, and don't laugh at me. It went like this. Stuckey's, Stuckey's, icky, sticky goo. Stuckey's, Stuckey's, it always sticks to you. Okay, so we're laughing, of course, and went in, had breakfast. It was good, and we got out without buying a pecan roll. So here we are driving up the road, and he's telling me little bits and pieces of his childhood and asking me questions about school. He didn't care about those when we were at home. So long as my report card showed that I was doing the job I was supposed to do, okay with him. And so he's asking me, do I like school? Do I have friends? Okay, so we were actually conversing. We stopped at some Civil War battle sites. We were admiring the scenery. One thing led to another. We got to Indiana and we were friendly. And Mom said, well, how did it go? And I said, not bad. He was actually pretty nice. And so she said, I'm so glad to hear that. And I said, did you say anything to him? And she said, well, I told him that he needed to mind his manners. I said, well, he did. I said, so you did a good job. Thank you. I spent 2 weeks with my girlfriends because I had friends in the neighborhood, spent time with my grandparents. It was a wonderful vacation. It was a wonderful break, a summer break where I could be with people that I loved, my cousins, went swimming at their lake house, and it was just great. It was really great. So anyway, even though I didn't want to go home, all right, well, Dad was there. We had fun on the way up, so we take the Cannonball and we go home. So of course, I was going to miss my grandmother terribly because she was my person. But, it was okay. Dad and I would, get along on the way home and we'd have fun. Okay, well, probably shouldn't have jumped to that conclusion. I just had hoped that things would be the way they were on the way up. So we're going down the road about 20 miles or so, and so I started chit-chatting a little bit about school and my friends in the music program at school, and he said, do you ever stop talking? And I said, I take it you want me to stop? And he said, I have a headache. Don't talk anymore until I tell you to. Okay. That was the last word I said to him for quite a long time. I had to pee a couple of times and I about blew up, but I was not going to tell him that I wanted to stop. I'd wet the seat first. So, here we are driving along, and we stopped for lunch and whatever, and I spoke to the waitress, but I did not speak to him. If I had to go to the ladies' room, I would point to it, and then back I would go. Into the car. Did you buckle your seatbelt? I would not. No words. You told me not to speak. All right, so here we are. We're heading towards Nashville, and the interstate at the time was torn all to heck, and traffic was always backed up. And we were getting later in the day, and so we were getting into rush hour. There was a place where we would pull off called the Murfreesboro exit, and we could go around this old town and come back out on the other side, get on the interstate, and we would pass most of the construction and get on our way. And we were going to spend the night in Monteagle, Tennessee, which is on the top of a mountain. We always stayed at a Holiday Inn up there, and so this is where the story about the Murfreesboro thing comes in. All right, so here we are, we're driving along, and I see the Murfreesboro exit coming, and I'm thinking, all right, should I say something? And I thought, no, I'm not going to. So we drive, and he sees the traffic starting to build in front of him, and he said, I'll be damned. He said, where was the Murfreesboro exit? He said, did you see it? I didn't say anything. And he said, did you hear me? I'm talking to you. And I said, so you're addressing me and you're telling me I can talk? Yes. And I said, about 20 minutes or so. He was back there. Why didn't you say something? Because you told me not to talk. Okay, so he cracks up. I mean, laughing. So we had to go through the traffic, but okay, so we lived through it. We got up to Monteagle, and I said, did you call to get a reservation? Nah, but they're always available. They weren't this time. So the only other place that was at that exit was at the one that I told you wasn't so great. And it was getting kind of late to go driving into town to try and find something else. We didn't know what was there, and so he just got us a room in the dumpy place. And it was an old motor lodge, had 2 beds and a big old crack going from stem to stern. It was really bad. And so he said, what a dump. And I said, well, it's only for one night. So he said, well, I'm hungry. Let's go and get something to eat. So they had a restaurant there. And I said, well, they do have a pool. We can check it out on the way. It was above ground. And I don't think that thing had been cleaned since God was a boy. So there was no swimming. We get to the restaurant and we're like pushing food around our plate because it was practically inedible. So he goes and he pays the bill, and we started coming back to the room, and I stopped and got a couple of bags of junk food from the vending machine because that was going to be dinner. Got back to the room. He wanted to watch CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Well, we're in the mountains, and it was a black and white TV with rabbit ears. You're not going to get a good signal. Sorry, I didn't mean to move it around. You're not going to get a good signal, but he noticed that when I walked by, that the signal would come back in. So he insisted that I stand there and hold the rabbit ears. So I'm standing there so he can watch Walter Cronkite going on about whatever. And finally I said, oh, this is crap. I'm not doing this. So I walked over and I got into bed. Well, about 2:00 in the morning, he shakes my shoulder. He says, get up, we're leaving. And I said, why? And he said, we're going. He said, I can't stand another minute in this place. Well, it turns out that we had some noisy neighbors who were going at it, and the headboard was hitting the wall rather loudly, and I didn't hear it. He did. So I was thinking, okay, when we went into the room from dinner, there was a lot of fog in the parking lot. So I went over to the window, pulled the drapes open, and I said, my God, we can't even see the car. I said, there's no way we can go down the mountain. We're not going to see anything. We'll die. Just get ready. He said, we'll be fine. I said, you're crazy. You are crazy. He said, just get ready. What choice did I have? So we got in the car, driving down this grade. Couldn't see on either side. He followed an 18-wheel truck with its blinkers on, maybe going 30. I don't even think he was going that fast. Dad, in the meantime, he's just whistling away and, just happy camper. And he was, keeping beat to whatever it was that he had going in his head with the steering column or the steering wheel. And in the meanwhile, I've got my face buried in my pillow. Every now and then I would glance up and maybe see a glimpse of the rocks on the far left side. And then maybe I might see a guardrail that would be the only thing that would be holding us on the road between that and a certain death at the bottom of the gorge. And by the time we got down the grade and the sun started to peek out, I was an absolute wreck. He's totally fine. And so he was starving. We pulled into a truck stop, and he ordered this thing that looked like a farmer's breakfast. I mean, had everything on it, lots and lots of food, and I'm eating one of those little itty-bitty things, the little boxes of cereal that you give to little kids, and barely able to choke back my Cheerios. But anyway, we got down the grade alive, and I don't even remember the rest of the trip. All I know is that we got home. Mom was flying in the next day. We picked her up at the airport, and she said, well, how did it go? I said, don't talk to me. And she said, what happened? I said, Mom, don't talk to me. So we get in the car, and a couple of days later, I finally told her what happened. Oh my gosh, she was furious, just furious. Trusted her only child to a maniac who was driving down a mountain at 2:00 in the morning when you can't see anything. We were in a cloud. So anyway, it was an experience. But the one thing that I think that I carried away from all of this is an understanding, at least more than I did know, of mental illness. That he wasn't firing on the same spark plugs that I was. He didn't feel things the way that I did. He didn't understand the kind of love that I had for people, because that wasn't how he was wired. It was, if he felt love, it was a very different thing. And I can't imagine what it was like to go through decades without treatment, because he had to. Now, he and our family doctor, I found out later, did know what was wrong. But because HIPAA laws had not been brought into play, then his employer, who was the one that gave him his insurance, would have found out about it. And then he would have lost everything, would have lost his job. So to have to struggle with that for so long and then try and fix it after all that time. And bipolar disorder is a lot harder to fix the longer you wait to try and treat it. So I learned to notice when the blinds were going down and that I needed to stop talking. And I also noticed when it seemed like he got agitated and what started it. And so it was an opening to my understanding of what he was and what I was up against. So I guess you could call it Dad Boot Camp. I didn't really get the clearest understanding of him until he started getting treatment when I was about 24. Prior to that, I hadn't a clue what was wrong with him. All I knew was that I wanted to get away from him as much as possible. But he started getting treatment when I was 24, and for the last 20 years of his life, we got close. And he never loved me exactly the way I loved him. I don't think he was able to feel that. But I loved him enough for the both of us. And when he was alive, I felt like there was stability in my life because I could ask him a question and he answered it. And he was usually right. So losing that was very, very hard. And he was funny. Even the Stucky song, I mean, come on. He was just a very unique individual. And I have missed him every day of my life. So anyway, that's tonight's story. I hope you had fun, at least for part of it. And love you guys a lot. Peace.